In the frozen north, where storms howl and the land itself seems alive, the Norse believed that every creature carried a story. Animals were not just beasts of the wild. They were omens, guardians, and reflections of the gods themselves. To the Vikings, the line between man, god, and beast was thin. The animal world pulsed with divine power, and every encounter carried a whisper from the old world, a reminder that nature was sacred, wild, and deeply dangerous. Among these creatures were real animals that shaped the myths we still tell today. Their claws, wings, and fangs inspired gods and monsters alike. These were the beings that helped define the Norse understanding of creation, death, and fate. The first of these is the raven, the black-winged shadow that followed Odin himself. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory. Every dawn they rose from the All-Father's shoulders, sweeping across Midgard, watching, listening, learning. And every night they returned with secrets from the world of men. But behind the myth stood a real creature, the raven of the northern lands, cunning, intelligent, and fearless. Vikings saw them hovering over battlefields, circling above dying men, feasting on the fallen. Ravens were always there, silent witnesses to glory and death. To the Norse, that could only mean one thing: they were chosen by Odin himself. It was said that if a raven circled a village before dawn, it carried a message from the gods. If one perched upon a warrior's helm before battle, victory was assured. Yet if it screamed 3 times from the trees, someone nearby was doomed to die. Even in the sagas, Odin's connection to these birds was inseparable. The god of wisdom sharing his mind with the most intelligent creature in the north. The Vikings' bond with ravens went far beyond myth. Their sails bore the raven's image. Their standards, known as raven banners, fluttered in the wind, believed to grant victory to those who carried them. But legend warned that when the banner fell still, death was coming for its bearer. Ravens were not just symbols of war. They were guardians of memory, of knowledge, of the dark wisdom that only comes from watching the world decay and renew. To the Vikings, the raven was not simply a scavenger. It was a messenger of fate. In the same forests where ravens flew, another beast prowled, one that stirred a deeper, more primal fear: the wolf. In Norse myth, the wolf is both a destroyer and a symbol of divine loyalty. Fenrir, son of Loki, was prophesied to devour Odin himself at Ragnarok. But before Fenrir, there were real wolves, gray, silent, haunting the fjords and forests. To live in the Viking Age was to know the sound of their howls echoing through the night. To the Norse, the wolf represented chaos barely contained. Farmers feared them, warriors respected them, yet they also revered them. The Vikings' own war bands were sometimes called Ulfhednar, wolfmen, berserkers who fought in trance-like fury, channeling the spirit of the wolf into battle. These men believed the wolf's strength lived within them. When they donned wolf pelts, they became something between man and beast, untouchable, unbreakable. Their roars terrified their enemies before swords even clashed. The myth of Fenrir mirrored that power. Chained by the gods themselves, destined to break free and devour the sun, Fenrir was the living embodiment of inevitable destruction, the wildness that no god or man could ever truly tame. The Norse knew that no matter how strong their gods, nature would always win in the end. The wolf was a mirror of the Viking soul, noble, ferocious, loyal to its pack but capable of untold carnage when betrayed or cornered. And though Fenrir was a monster, he was also a reminder that every beast the gods feared once came from the wilds they created. Far to the seas, beyond the fjords, another creature waited, one that haunted sailors' dreams and inspired myths that reached across centuries: the serpent. The real seas of Scandinavia were filled with life. Eels twisting through the waves, whales surfacing from the depths, and sea snakes gliding beneath the foam. These glimpses of moving shadows became the seed of something greater, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Said to be so vast it encircled the entire world, biting its own tail, Jormungandr was a god-sized reflection of the ocean's power. Every ripple on the surface, every crashing wave, every sudden storm, all could be blamed on its movement beneath the deep. But the Vikings didn't need to see a monster to believe in it. The ocean itself was alive. It devoured men without warning, dragged ships into whirlpools, and returned their remains to shore days later. Jormungandr was the name they gave to that fear, a serpent that represented the endless, inescapable reach of nature. When the serpent finally rises, it's said the world will end. Thor will slay it, but only after walking 9 steps before he falls dead from its poison. The balance of life and death sealed within a single encounter. For the Vikings, this was the truth of existence. The sea gives, and the sea takes away. Jormungandr was not evil. It was simply the circle. Creation and destruction intertwined, much like the serpent biting its tail. Closer to home, however, there was another creature tied to both gods and men, a beast revered and feared in equal measure: the boar. In the forests of Scandinavia, wild boars were symbols of strength, fertility, and courage. Their tusks could shred a man, and yet they were hunted as sacred game, their meat served at feasts to honor the gods. In the halls of Asgard, the golden boar Gullinbursti, forged by dwarves for the god Freyr, was said to run faster than any horse, its mane glowing bright enough to light the darkest night. But behind this shining myth stood the real boar. Fierce, territorial, unyielding. A beast that never ran from battle. To kill one was a test of bravery. To wear its tusks was to carry the favor of the gods. In many sagas, warriors compared themselves to boars, unstoppable when cornered, fighting until the last breath. The animal became a living symbol of the Viking warrior's spirit, unbreakable, defiant, and proud even in death. The boar's legend reminded the Norse of what they valued most: courage, endurance, and the eternal cycle of sacrifice. For the boar was both hunter and hunted, destroyer and feast, life and death bound together. Yet among all the creatures of the North, none held more mystery than the bear. Massive, intelligent, and terrifyingly human in its movements, the bear was regarded as kin to mankind. Some tribes believed their ancestors descended from bears. Others claimed bears were warriors reborn, their souls trapped in the bodies of beasts, living out a second life of strength and solitude. In the sagas, men who fought with unstoppable rage were said to have the bear's spirit. These were the berserkers, a word that may have meant bear shirt, for they wore bear pelts into battle and believed no blade could harm them. The bear embodied everything the Norse admired: power, fearlessness, independence, but also danger. It lived alone, fought alone, and could kill a man with a single strike. To hunt one was to risk your life, but to succeed was to gain its power. Even the gods respected it. The goddess of healing and rebirth, Air, was said to take the form of a bear to protect her followers. And the bear's hibernation became a symbol of death and resurrection, sleeping through the winter to return with the spring. For the Vikings, the bear was proof that the divine existed in the wild. That strength and wisdom could be found not only in the heavens, but in the forests and mountains of Midgard. These animals, the raven, the wolf, the serpent, the boar, and the bear, were not just creatures of myth. They were reflections of the world the Norse knew, a world where gods walked beside men, and nature itself was alive with power and intention. Every hunt, every battle, every storm was seen as part of a larger story, one written not by kings or poets, but by the beasts that roamed the land and sea. In a time before science, animals were teachers. Their instincts revealed truths that men had long forgotten, that survival demands respect, and that every life is bound to the cycles of creation and destruction. When the Vikings told stories of Odin's ravens or Fenrir's fury, they weren't just speaking of fantasy. They were describing the living symbols of their world, the creatures they feared, respected, and depended on. To understand Norse myth is to understand that the gods were never alone. They were bound to the wild, to the wings, claws, and fangs of the animals that shared their fate. And even now, centuries later, when the last echoes of the sagas fade, these beasts still haunt our imagination. The raven still circles above our cities. The wolf still prowls the edges of our dreams. The serpent still sleeps beneath the waves. The boar still charges through forgotten forests. And somewhere in the northern dark, a bear still stands on its hind legs, staring into the cold wind, as if remembering an ancient truth. The Norse saw animals not as lesser beings, but as fragments of the divine. Each carried a lesson. Each reflected a piece of the cosmos. To harm one carelessly was to offend the balance of life itself. In the end, the creatures of Norse mythology were not born in fantasy. They were born in observation. The Vikings looked at the world around them, at the flight of ravens, the howl of wolves, the roar of bears, and they saw eternity staring back. Their legends remind us that every creature has its story, and that even now, beneath all our cities and machines, the old world still breathes. The myths never truly died. They only changed shape,